What's going on, YouTube? My name is GinJTCG or Chris, and today I'm back bringing another masterclass for the day, and we're going to be talking about Toedscruel EX. So just to give a bit of a preview, I am going to be talking about this deck's overall deck list, why it's powerful, why we're playing Toedscruel as a fun little rogue deck, and then I'm going to be talking about different tech cards for the deck, and then jumping into a bit of a matchup spread and how to navigate our way through some of the matchups, some of the most important things to consider, some prize mapping tips, and just different skills utilized across the board through the top 15. I think it's actually 14 decks I threw up there. If I'm not mistaken, it's 14 or 15. And then I'll be closing out with a power ranking for the deck. So I created the Meta Mastery rating system, which I've been using for my other master classes. If you haven't seen the other three, I definitely recommend go checking them out. We got a Crustle one, a Terra Box one, and a Joltik Box one. So this is going to be our first rogue or off meta mastery video, so I'm excited to get into it. And I put together a little presentation on it just to kind of help with the formatting, spice things up. I'm still working on different ways in this new series to make things more enjoyable for you guys as viewers. So, if there's more you want to see on it, definitely let me know in the comments down below. But yeah, without further ado, I kind of want to jump into some Toedscruel because that's why y'all clicked on this video and just get a bit more knowledge out there. So, in general, I just want to first talk about why we're using Toedscruel as the core. And the first thing that comes to mind is the typing at the moment. We are seeing a rise in Charizard EX, which is a grass weak Pokemon. Grimmsnarl is still holding some weight as a popular pick as well, so the type matchups actually look pretty good. We are swinging for weakness into a few matchups, and although, sometimes it's a little bit tricky to navigate with Charizard because they swing so hard, we still have the upper hand in that matchup. So, with a few grass weak decks and also the lack of fire decks in the meta right now, the grass typing honestly is pretty solid. So, shout out to Toedscruel for being a really good type to be in the card game at the moment. The ability is one of the biggest draws to Toedscruel, though. With the solid defensive ability to stop effects like Phantom Dive and Devolution, you have Protective Mycelium, where you prevent all effects of attack. So as mentioned, Phantom Dive, not the damage done, not the 200 damage done, but the damage counters, and effects like Devolution, where you you devolve every Pokemon that your opponent has in play. It doesn't affect anything on Toedscruel's board so long as it has energy attached to it. And we'll get to the list in a little bit, but we are playing 12 grass energy. So, when we just load up our board with energies, utilizing, I don't know why that word was so difficult for me, utilizing Teal Mask Ogerpon, with the Teal Dance ability, we can just accelerate energy, stop massive plays. We've got Energy Switch to move energy across the board as well as set up Toedscruel in one turn. So when we're comboing those two things, it becomes very hard to go for some of the more unique plays because we're seeing a rise in Devo and Guardy. We're seeing a lot of Dragapult right now. So, stopping those is actually very, very effective, as well as any status conditions such as Confusion from Monkey Dories, which a lot of people are doing to buy time, or even retreat locking on cards like Maractus or Ethan Sudo. Those are all effects of attacks that we're shutting down. So the ability Protective Mycelium honestly comes in clutch so many times. We also have a really good attack option, though. With Colony Rush, we do 80 base damage and 40 more damage for each of your bench Pokemon with any Grass Energy. So we're setting up a bunch of Grass Energy across the board for Protective Mycelium, right? But then what's nice is Colony Rush takes advantage of that and says for each grass Pokemon that's set up, for example, let's say we have 4 Pokemon on our bench with energy attached, with grass energy attached, which is all we play, we actually do 160 more damage. So in that scenario, we're swinging 240 and we're taking KOs on any basic EX Pokemon in the game except for Blood Moon or Saluna, which is fine because that's a late game Pokemon we could totally take care of because we'd have a lot more time to get that 5th or 6th energy down. So Colony Rush is super, super sweet because you can really take advantage of any massive OHKOs with the addition of Area 0 Underdepths. So you could just load up energy across an 8 bench board and swing for enough to OHKO anything in the game, which is super nice. So moving on from Toedscruel, I want to spend a little bit more time talking about just the deck list in general and why we're playing it, the different parts in it, because although it's super simplified, we actually have a few moving pieces that I do want to highlight, all individually at some point. So of course, the first thing to mention is there are 8 different Toedscruels in this format right now. Currently, everyone seems to be running the 60 HP Toedscool that we've got in the list at a 4 of, maybe a 3 of, what they 1 of other Toedscool. I think the most important thing on why this one seems to be the optimal Toedscool at the moment is it's got a 1 retreat cost. So when we're looking at this Toedscool, it's just going to be easy to get it out of the active if we need to, whereas the other Toedscool that I really, really like, it does put your opponent to sleep, which is nice, but that 2 retreat cost can make it tricky to retreat out of the active if you're trying to protect it. So in general, playing this Toedscool does work out pretty well. Having 60 HP is a bit of a downside because, you know, it could get affected by 2 Monkey Dories pretty easily or be taken out with Phantom Dive if there's no energy on it and you don't have Protective Mycelium up yet. But in general, you know, as long as you get those Toadschools down and evolved early before opponents like Gardevoir or even, you know, Dragapult that uses Monkey Dories and stuff like that can get 2 Monkey Dories off, you know, you'll be good to go. Then we talked about Toedscruel EX and why it's so powerful, but the single prize Toedscruel with Slime Mold Colony is another amazing one of that really, really helps in matchups like Golden Go and even Raging Bolt, which does play a lot of Night Stretchers, and even Energy Retrievals. With Slime Mold Colony, cards in your opponent's discard pile cannot be put into their hand by any effects of abilities or trainer cards. So Night Stretchers, Superior Energy Retrievals, all get shut down. So when you're up against Golden Go and they're trying to just loop Oko after Oko, it's going to be very hard to pull those together without bossing up this Toedscruel and dealing with it. And if they're doing that, that just means they're taking a single prize KO and not a 2 prize KO. So, you know, you could get the edge by then going in with your Toedscruel EX and taking a 2 prize KO on Golden Go. And even though they have a weakness in play, it actually doesn't really ruin the math too much. I mean, I think we, need like 5 or 6 Pokemon down with energy, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, we'll get into that in the matchup spread, so I'm not worried about the math now, but still, you know, we can work around it. It's a 30 HP damage resistance, and that's really the most that comes up. But with Slime Mold Colony, you know, it creates very big scenarios where you could work around it. Teal Mask Ogerpon is going to be the next card that we definitely want to spend some time on. With Teal Dance, this is going to be your main draw engine in the deck, as well as how you spread energy to use Colony Rush and Protective Mycelium so effectively. So you attach a basic energy card from your hand to this Pokemon, and then when you do, you draw a card. So not only is it an amazing draw engine where we have a 4 of pretty much everything in the deck for pure consistency, but it also gets energy in play, so your Protective Mycelium and your Colony Rush can get set up a little bit better. Now, I do want to mention that this is why we're playing 4 Energy Switch as well, and I know normally I like to talk about the trainers after the Pokemon, but the reason we're playing Energy Switch is to utilize Teal Dance and then move an energy onto Toedscruel with a manual attach, and boom, now you're good to go and ready to attack with a simple, you know, ability use and then an item, which you're playing a bunch of, so it's not super hard to draw. The other nice thing about Ogerpon is it has a pretty solid attack. Myriad Leaf Shower doing 30 damage plus 30 more for each energy attached to both active Pokemon actually could get ramped up pretty quickly, especially if you're staring down an Iron Hands or something like that with 4 energy attached to it. I mean, you could be swinging with Myriad Leaf Shower for some easy Okos, especially if you energy switch an energy from one Ogerpon to the one in your active spot with your energy attached. So definitely a solid attacker for sure. Iron Leaves is, I think, the card that you could check out the most when playing this deck. I don't necessarily think this is, you know, the world's best card. I think it helps in some matchups. It helps keep some energy in play. It does function as a switch Pokemon with Rapid Vernier, but it isn't necessarily like an absolutely must include. I think, you know, if you want to replace this spot with a Cornerstone Ogerpon out, if that makes sense, not Cornerstone Ogerpon itself, but a way to KO it, I think this would be the spot to do so. But Iron Leaves is definitely a popular card that people are playing right now because of its effectiveness with Rapid Vernier, where if you don't have any energy switch, this is a great attacker because when you bench it, you can move it to your active spot, and then you can attach as many energy from your other Pokemon to this one as you like. So you could take 3 Grass Energy off some Ogerpon, and then swing for 180 with its attack. So it's a good 2-shot Pokemon attack, which tandems well with Toedscruel, while getting energy moved to it so you don't have to utilize your energy switches. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest reasons we really love an Iron Leaves in this deck. Now, we pretty much get to all the support Pokemon because it's pretty much all this deck has for offensive capabilities. We've got 2.5 attackers, I'd say, because we don't use Iron Leaves that much, and we're really just relying on the Toedscruel and Teal Mask Ogerpons. So for the engine, we got Squawkabilly for the Squawk and Seas to make sure we're getting our Toadschools down quick and early. We're not too worried about the prize liability of Squawkabilly because we have so many low HP 2-prize Pokemon in this match. So if our opponent wants to boss KO something, it's not going to be much harder for them to KO a Squawkabilly as it is to KO like a Latias or a Fezandipiti or a Mew, which like 9 times out of 10 we also have in play. Latias allows for all of our basic Pokemon to have a no retreat cost, and I think this does warrant some, you know, playability to using the sleeping Toedscool, because that could stall a little bit better, but in case you can't get Latias out, I definitely think it's nicer to play the Toedscool we got in the deck. But, you know, we still have Eon Blade, which we can't utilize at all, whereas some other decks can, so our Latias becomes a lot less effective, and if this gets bossed up and retreat locked, it gets a little bit annoying, but remember, you prevent all effects of attacks with any Pokemon that has any Grass Energy attached. So as long as, or has any energy attached, period. So as long as you attach a Grass Energy to Latias, you can't get retreat locked, which is pretty sweet and something to keep in mind. Mew EX is another really good draw engine in this deck. I feel oftentimes that you're playing this deck, I mean, your hand will get down to like 1 or 0 cards because you'll just play so many items really quickly. So having restart to draw up to 3 cards is huge, and also utilizing genome hacking in tricky situations can be amazing. I think currently this is the only card in this list that can deal with Cornerstone Ogerpon effectively, because if you use genome hacking to copy Cornerstone's Demolish attack, it has Shred. So you actually shred through their ability, allowing you to take it out first if you get the first attack off with Mew on the Cornerstone. So this current list does have a way to deal with it, in case anyone was wondering. Is it the most effective? No, but there is a single prize, or whoopsies, I dropped my fidget, I'm sorry. There is a single prize Ogerpon that we will talk about in the tech cards that I think does help to some degree with this and take some of the pressure off Mew, but in general, genome hacking can be used in different situations, such as against Dragapult to copy Phantom Dive, or in the late game against Charizard EX to copy Burning Darkness for 330 when they inevitably have 1 prize card remaining. Now we have Fezandipiti, which is our other big draw card for the deck with Flip the Script. We all know what it does. Cruel Arrow is a nice attack in the worst of times, and it's huge to draw us 3 cards when we get KO'd and have a massive hand, and are digging for Iono because we don't want to research away our 3 bosses' orders. Budew with Itchy Pollen, I mean, hey, who loves a good item locking card? I mean, I know in a deck like this, sometimes you just need to buy a turn or 2 to really get ramped up, so sitting behind a Budew and giving up a single prize Pokemon really isn't the end of the world, and is something that is very easy to fall back on, and you could always just get rid of with Area 0 Underdepths, because if you have it in play and have a full bunch of 8, and then your opponent gets rid of it by playing something like a Jamming Tower or Artisan, which are 2 popular stadiums right now, I mean, you could just get Budew off your bench when you drop down to 5, so, you know, isn't even the biggest of liabilities. So now getting into the trainer cards, we're going to have a lot more consistency in this list compared to a lot of others. Given that we're playing Squawkabilly as well, I mean, we are going to fly through our deck with that ability, as well as 4 Professor's Research and 3 Iono. Having the ability to just fly through your deck this quickly really does help getting your Toedscruels out early, getting them out effectively, and getting energy straight across the board on the multitude of Teal Mask Ogerpons that you will inevitably have on your bench. Playing Iono in the late game and having 3 of them in the deck does allow for some solid hand disruption plays, which is always a nice option as well. And then playing 4 copies of Energy Switch, as mentioned, to move the energy from Ogerpons to Toedscruels means that you'll dig through your deck very quickly and use Energy Switch to set up very, very fast, especially if you are going first, because you don't even need that first manual attachment. You'll do enough natural draw where you can probably just go manual attach Energy Switch and swing for at least a little bit of damage and set up a 2-shot KO, if not an OHKO on a low HP Pokemon. Now we're playing 3 copies of Boss's Orders and 1 copy of Prime Catcher, so we are going to be playing 4 Gusting Outs in this deck. I don't think playing Iron Bundle or a 4th Boss's Orders is totally necessary, as long as you're cognizant of using research and getting rid of Boss's Orders and keeping that in mind when you're doing your prize mapping in the beginning of the game and thinking through how you're going to take down the matchup you're staring at. This is definitely plenty of Gust. I mean, we do have a good bit of draw between Teal Dance, Restart, and Flip the Script to dig out these Gusting cards, and I think this is a perfectly fine line of them. Prime Catcher as the ace-spec feels so good in this deck, because oftentimes we really do want to move around and go from Toedscruel to a different Toedscruel because 1 tank to hit, or one of them has like 2 energy and the other one has 1 energy, and you really don't need to load up multiple Toedscruels. You're just using it for a more effective colony rush. So I think Prime Catcher as our 1 switch out is actually a great ace spec for the deck. Now for Pokemon Search, we've got 4 Bug Catching Set, 4 Nest Ball, and 2 Ultra Balls. Now, the 4 Nest Balls and 2 Ultra Balls are super nice, and I don't think playing the Buddy Buddy Poffin is ever worth it, because we really want to make sure that these Nest Balls are just dragging our Ogerpons and our Squawkabillys and our Fezandipitis and our Mews and the Latias straight out of the deck. The really nice thing about Nest Ball is it isn't grass specific like Bug Catching Set, which I'll get to, but also it isn't HP limited. So you can take out many of the draw supporters that are absolutely essential to getting this deck going. Now, the two Ultra Balls are really nice because they just guarantee your evolution Pokemon, which is sweet, but we also have Bug Catching Sets to help with that as well, where you look at the top 7 cards of your deck and you reveal up to 2 in any combination of grass Pokemon and basic grass energy cards you find there and put them into your hand. So in other words, you're essentially playing Pokegear 3.0, but for like 80% of this deck, because that can get you a Toedscool in the early game, a Toedscruel in the mid or late game, an Ogerpon to help out the draw engine, a single prize Toedscruel to help out with Golden Go, or one of your 12 energy. So the options are pretty unlimited when you're playing Bug Catching Set. And remember, when you're playing Squawk and Season for research, you'll fly through your deck. So if there's a grass Pokemon you're missing from those, chances are looking at the next 7 cards, it should hopefully be there. 2 Super Odd is going to be the recovery out for this deck. I really don't think Night Stretcher is the play when you're playing Toedscruel, and I think that's really just because, remember, we have such amazing draw power to fly through our deck, and oftentimes we want to recycle more than just getting one of something out of the discard pile. By playing Rod, we could get a Toedscruel EX and 2 energy, and those 2 energy can not only set up another Toedscruel, but allow for you to get 80 more damage on your bench if you spread them across 2 different bench Pokemon. So I think playing the 2 Super Rods, even if one of them is just to recover like a Toedscruel, and then the rest of that rod and the entire next rod are for 3 energy, I think that is the nicest thing about Super Rod in general. I don't think we ever go energy recycler, because recycling the Pokemon is absolutely critical, especially if you prize a Toedscruel or 2. Things could get pretty tricky, and recycling that guy is going to become more and more important in those situations. So I really do like the 2 Super Rod in the deck. Now, to round out the deck's trainer cards, we do have 3 copies of Area 0 Underdepths, which I've talked about a little bit at different points. This is really just going to help with loading up the Pokemon in play with energy, so Colony Rush can swing for Oko on things like Dragapult and Gardevoir EX, because those are going to be some pretty difficult matchups to navigate. So allowing Toedscruel to get over 300 and get, or excuse me, what is it, like 240 and get up to 320, or I think even 360 damage is its cap, is super, super nice. The 12 basic grass energy is not a count I would really mess with in this deck. I know that seems a lot higher compared to some of the other meta decks, but you got to remember we need to spread this energy across the board and not just load up like 2 or 3 Toedscruels ready to attack. We also need a couple Ogerpons with an energy attached, probably get 1 energy down on the Mew and the Fezandipiti and the Latias to protect them from things like Phantom Dive as well. So we really do like having higher counts of energy to make sure those are getting spread very, very nicely. Jumping into the next section of the video, I want to talk about some of the tech cards for this deck, and I spent some time looking at and researching different like grass tech cards, different supporter cards that I wanted to look into. Briar is one that I guess I'll put in the honorable mention, but didn't make the slide cut because it really doesn't come up, and although it's super nice and you could take an extra pride card if your opponent has 2 remaining, you can only do that if you're using Teal Mask Ogerpon as an attacker and not Toedscruel. So it does limit this deck and kind of force you to use the Teal Mask Ogerpon more, whereas naturally I feel like you kind of don't need to, and you just use it as that draw / damage buff engine. So I think playing the Briar wasn't necessarily the world's best thing. Carmine was another supporter that I think you definitely could swap with research if you really want to just double down on going first. I think it's honestly not the world's like worst option, given this is a huge going second meta, and just banking on going first actually helps a ton. But of course you're drawing less naturally, and I think just a Squawk and Seize to just even get you 1 Toedscruel on your bench is hopefully enough to get you through most games, so I think that's fine, but definitely worth a shout. I think the biggest tech cards I want to talk about are the 3 that are back on screen here, though. The Teal Mask Ogerpon, the single prize one, the single prize Rude, and the single prize Maractus. Now, 2 of them function with a very similar like goal, and then the third one is there because I just think it's a funny retreat lock card. The Teal Mask Ogerpon and the Zarude are both outs to dealing with Cornerstone Ogerpon, which I think is getting more and more popular given the strength and popularity of Golden Go and Charizard even coming back in the meta. With Ogre Comeback, you are limited. You are kind of forced into a situation where if your opponent limits their bench much, Ogre Comeback really isn't going to swing much, but its energy cost is infinitely cheaper than Jungle Whip, which I think is the better attack overall. Ogre Comeback, you do 20 more damage plus 20 more for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So if they are playing like a Walls deck and they've got a bunch of bench Pokemon, you could easily OHKO with Ogre Comeback. But if they just lead Cornerstone and don't bench anything else, this card, I mean, it's there for Cornerstone, but it becomes very, very useless because now you're not going to swing for more than like, what, 80 damage or 40 if they don't have any bench Pokemon, which is pretty rough. Now, the Zarude is a little nicer, But remember, the Jungle Rope attack does cost 3 energy and is now just as expensive as Teal Dance, with the exception of we don't have an ability to get energy to it. So we need to go manual attachment plus double energy switch, or double manual attachment plus energy switch, and both of which might take a little bit too long to get rolling. Now, Jungle Whip does do 80 damage plus 80 more if you put all energy attached to this Pokemon in your hand. So you swing for 160, multiplied by 2 is 320 damage for KO. However, the amazing effect is putting the energy back into your hand. So if your opponent does KO Zarude right after, you still have 3 energy to attach to Pokemon via manual attachments or Teal Dances the following turn, which is really, really amazing and helps conserve a lot of energy. Maractus is the last Pokemon I wanted to talk about as a tech card for the deck. With Exploding Needles, when you are KO'd, you do put 6 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon, which honestly comes up in more funny situations than I'd like to admit. I think this is an ability that people always know is there, but forget to factor in when they're like doing their prize mapping and thinking about like how long their Pokemon has left to live via attacks and stuff like that. The bigger reason this card is here, though, is for Corner, where during your opponent's next turn, the defending Pokemon can't retreat. So since every single deck seems to be playing Latias and stuff like that, playing Corner Maractus honestly isn't the worst out, because you could keep that Latias stuck there for an unholy amount of time, or lock out like other Pokemon like Monkey Dory and stuff like that, just to buy you time to get your Ogerpons, get your Teal Mask, Ogerpons and your Toedscruel EXs all set up. So I do like the Maractus as well. Moving on to the next section of this video, I really do want to talk about the matchup data for this deck and talk a bit about the matchup spreads. Now, I did try to break this down as best as I possibly could. You have to remember that this is a deck that not many people play, so where I did get as much data from Limitless and Trainer Hill as I absolutely could, these percentages or rankings could be a little bit off because not many people are running it right now. So a lot of these I did kind of rank based on my own experience playing Toedscruel. Now, I don't have anything to necessarily prove that I'm the world's best Toedscruel player or anything, but I have been playing this card damn near since it came out, and I'm pretty sure I have 9 copies of Toedscruel EX just to prove that I love playing it in just different capacities. I mean, this is one of my favorite cards. Does that mean anything to you guys? I mean, probably not, but I've spent some time working through a lot of these matchups and mathing them out as absolutely best as I could. Some of these I did kind of sack my own opinion and go with the data a little bit more, such as like the pure Dragapult matchup, but I'll talk about that a little bit. I think the more comfortable you are into some of these matchups, like your chances of winning will slightly increase. And I'm not saying I'm the world's best, Toedscruel player against Dragapult, but I definitely think it's more of a 50-50 for me instead of a rough matchup. But a lot more people online playing this deck seem to have a rougher time into it, so I'm not going to put more shade on them and say that it's a fine matchup when maybe it's not, and I'm over, having a little bit of luck or something like that. So, we got a good matchup data, example here, like a opinionated one, that utilized a lot of data too. So anyways, we do have 3 auto wins, which are super, super nice. And those are going to be Zoroark EX, Grimmsnarl EX, and Dragapult Charizard, which, if you think about why these are all auto wins, they just get hammered by grass attackers. I mean, yes, Grimmsnarl does do a lot of spread, which could get annoying. We're not going to let a single Pokemon breathe for more than one turn. We're going to OHKO everything so insanely easily and without an insane amount of Monkey Dories and everything, and Frostlass set up to damage their own Monkey Dories. I mean, they're not going to be able to one-shot our Toedscruel initially, so we're going to get ahead in that matchup very easily and stay ahead. When we're up against Zoroark, I mean, that's just a grass-weak Pokemon, so half of their Reshiram card, and pretty much the entire reason it's there, the Virtuous Flames attack, just becomes useless. I mean, we're not going to leave any damage for that thing to live because they're weak to grass Pokemon, and now we just need 2 Ogerpons on our bench with a Toedscruel set up in the active spot, and we're already swinging for KO. We're swinging for 320 damage because of the weakness, so that feels amazing. Now, Dragapult Charizard is surprisingly an auto win as well, and yes, they have Dragapult, which could be a little bit annoying, although we do prevent the damage counters from Phantom Dive. They also have to utilize Charizard EX to get the energy in play to attack consistently, which is a very easy boss KO for us, and then we can also load up a bunch of energy across our board and one-shot a Dragapult in the late game, so that deck also feels pretty amazing. When we're looking at the good matchups, we are going to be looking at Dragapult Pidgeot and Dragapult Dusknoir. Both of these I kind of want to talk about together as the 2 big Charizard variants right now. Neither of them are bad. I mean, both of them feel very comfortable. We have a grass weakness, but I don't want people thinking that the second they see a Charizard, they're instantly winning because of the weakness. Pretty much every Charizard deck right now is utilizing Chi-Yu, and Chi-Yu is absolutely amazing at taking down, stage 1 Pokemon like Goldengo, and sadly, we're also weak to Fire Pokemon. And although I said Fire Pokemon aren't insanely meta relevant, this is probably the only one that actually causes us a hard time. when you're up against Charizard, you want to make sure that you're not KOing a single prize Pokemon so that they can utilize Chi-Yu to KO the first 2 prize Pokemon, ideally your Toedscruel if they're, if you're the Charizard player. You want to make sure that you're just waiting to take a boss KO on a Charizard or some insane like Prime Catcher boss loop when you've got enough Pokemon ready to just blow up a Pidgeot. But if you're not swinging for 2 prize cards, you really don't want to attack in this match because you don't want that Chi-Yu to become live until you could gust around it and 2-4-6 them. So just make sure you're keeping that in mind when you're up against Dragapult. Obviously, if you're up against the Dusknoir variant, they could go Dusknoir plus Charizard in the early game to take the KO on a Toedscool. But if they're doing all that and giving you the prize card off Dusknoir, that just means it doesn't feel as bad when you have to inevitably KO the Chi-Yu at some point because you'll even out your prize cards back and your prize mapping shouldn't be affected too bad. Joltik Box is a matchup that I also think is pretty solid at as well. Around a 60% win rate based on the online results as well as my own personal testing. This matchup, I think the scariest thing really is that Pikachu EX with Resolute Heart. We really don't have a single way to deal with Resolute Heart, which is annoying, but we have plenty of Gust options to deal with their Iron Hands, their Fezandipiti, their Squawkabilly, their Latias, their Mew EX. I mean, there's so many bench 2-prize Pokemon in this matchup that we should ideally be able to work around Pikachu. But, of course, the more they utilize Pikachu and limit the rest of their bench, the harder it's going to be for us. So I think good Joltik Box players can analyze that, but I think they kind of just inevitably bench some 2-prize Pokemon by default, such as Fez and Latias. So, just using your gusting cards effectively and taking those out will make this matchup feel pretty simple, given everything else, since they really only have one good attacker here. Moving on to the 50-50s, there are 4 50-50 matchups, and I think Dragapult honestly could be pushed toward, like pure Dragapult could be pushed more towards like the lower middle end of those 50-50s as well, but we'll get into that in a bit. First up, we do have Joltik Gholdengo. I think this matchup is definitely a lot easier than straight Gholdengo, but a little bit harder than straight Joltik Box because they can utilize Gholdengo, which does have that annoying resistance and the easy ability to just blow up anything in play. Now, the biggest thing in this matchup is really just getting that single prize Toedscruel down with Slime Mode Colony. I mean, once you do that and KO their first Iron Hands or Pikachu EX, it's going to be very hard for them to KO anything without gusting up and taking a single prize KO on that Toedscruel. So if you can KO Iron Hands before they go Ampy very much on the Toedscruel, I mean, you're going to feel amazing and be in a pretty solid spot against this deck. Now, the other Gholdengo, which I'll talk about right now since I'm talking about one of them before the EV box, the other Gholdengo is definitely a little bit harder because they're at effectively 290 HP. You actually do need 2 Pokemon past, the ideal 4 to KO a Raging Bull. You are going to have to go up to 6 benched Pokemon, so you are going to need to utilize that Area 0 Underdepths very effectively. And although that seems scary, just remember they probably have a Genesect EX on the board, which you can KO with 5 Pokemon without the Stadium, or a Fezandipiti. So you could take 4 prize cards in that matchup pretty consistently without even touching a Gholdengo. And as long as you're forcing the Slime Mold Colony Toedscruel down their throat, it's going to be so hard for this deck to just loop big KO after big KO without going boss KO on a single prize Pokemon at some point. Now, EV box, definitely a little bit tricky, but I think feels pretty solid overall. Flareon's Burning Charge attack actually misses the Oko by 10 damage, or 20 damage, because they're swinging for 130. No, I was right, it's 10. We have 270 HP, not 280. Burning Charge will do 260 for weakness, and although that feels awful, it's whiffing the KOs, and that feels worse for them for sure. You can also shut down half this deck's effects, and by half, I simply mean Angelite Sylveon. That thing is obnoxious. I can't stand it. Angelite has made me want to drive my head through a wall. And just having energy on our benched Pokemon so that they can't shuffle them back into our deck is literally the world's best feeling. So, shutting that guy down pretty much altogether does feel pretty nice. Because they're missing that early KO with the Burning Charge, they might have to fall back on using something like a Waterpon to take 2 KOs on your unevolved Toedscools, so just be mindful of that. But again, utilizing things like Slime Mold Colony can also shut down their Night Stretchers, which does affect this deck pretty hard, and I think allows for this deck to be on the higher end of the 50-50s, around 53-54% from my own experience and the data. Raging Bull is going to be the last 50-50 matchup we got here. Raging Bull, similar to Charizard, is just who can take the first 2 prize KO. You've got way too many low HP basic EX Pokemon to worry about like prize liabilities. Just send it Honestly, try to go first if you know you're up against Raging Bull, and make sure you can get that early Gust KO on a Raging Bull EX. If they go in with something like Slitherwings or Baby Bolt, that's fine as long as they're KOing a basic, and neither of those do enough damage to KO a full 2-prize Pokemon in your deck, with the exception of, like, I don't know, I think Squawkabilly, and even then I don't totally think so. So yeah, like I wouldn't sweat Raging Bolt too much. Definitely is a pure 50-50 matchup from my experience. But as long as you can just wait to Prime Catcher their 2-prize Pokemon on the bench and 2-4-6 them with your single prize Pokemon in the active spot to give them on your first turn, you'll feel fine. Pure Dragapult is definitely the easier of the more Dragapult dominated variants, not counting Dragapult Charizard. We do shut down the Phantom Dive damage counters, but that doesn't make Monkey Dory plus Dragapult any less annoying to deal with, and I feel like most pure Dragapult players are playing 2 Monkey Dories at this point. So remember, spread your bench, go for the Yoko. You do have Area 0 Underdepths. They are playing 1-2 stadiums, so you should be winning that stadium more. You should have more than your opponent, but be mindful that if you're using one, you pretty much need to take an Oko on that turn or you might lose value out of it. Gardevoir EX is definitely going to be one of the rougher matchups, coming in at around a 42% win rate. This one is hard because they just utilize single prize Pokemon so effectively. But if you could go for a big boss KO on Gardevoir EX and even a big boss KO on a Fezandipiti EX, you actually can get the jump on this deck because we are so much faster than it. So although it's a rough matchup, it's definitely not an auto loss, and you definitely have outs to it. You just got to remember that you are going to get Drifloon, you are going to get Screamtails. You need to evolve your Toedscruels before they get multiple Monkey Dories down. They will abuse Monkey Dory, and at that point you really might just need to be utilizing the Teal Mask Ogerpons as your big attackers. But assuming you could get a couple Toedscruels in play before they get a bunch of Monkey Dories, don't be afraid to go for that aggressive play and take down the Gardevoir, take down the Fez. These Screamtails and the Drifloon are always going to have energy attached. They're always going to Oko you, so don't be afraid to chase down the 2 prize cards and even up the match as best as possible. Now, for our auto losses, we do have Typhlosion, which surprisingly isn't the world's worst matchup, but it is still absolutely abysmal. Thankfully, not many people at all are playing Typhlosion currently, so this isn't the one I'm worried about the most. But it's pretty much enough said when you're looking at a single prize fire attacker that doesn't just swing for weakness, it swings for enough damage on base KO while still prizing in Ethan's adventure, as long as they could get like Bangle and everything. Not that they'll need it. I mean, they swing for weakness, so I think just one adventure or two will absolutely cook you. So they really don't even care if one is prized. You need literally all 4 to be prized to be worried. So yeah, not good. Surprisingly, not the worst. Dragapult Dusknoir is definitely a very, very bad matchup for this deck, and I would say probably a huge auto loss. Yes, you do shut down Phantom Dive damage counters, but now they're utilizing Monkey Dory plus Dusknoir plus 200 damage consistently with Dragapult, and that is just annoying. I mean, it could one-shot your Toedscruels too quickly before you could set up a big Oko, so you're already behind in the prize trade, and Dusknoirs could take out effective benched Pokemon. I mean, if you go Dusknoir and then Monkey Dory, you're even going to take out things like Squawkabilly, or, you could swing for eventually getting a KO on a Mew EX or Fezandipiti without ever having to Phantom Dive into it, even if you protect it from damage counters with the Protective Mycelium ability. So, I mean, this deck feels pretty rough. I think in general, you want to chase down any support Pokemon you can, more so in this matchup than anything else. If you got to take a KO on a single prize Pokemon, it really is tricky on do you chase down a Dusclops or do you chase down a Dracloak if you're staring at a bunch of middle evolutions. I think allowing them to have a draw engine feels a lot better than allowing them to Oko your Pokemon, since generally they just swing for base 200 damage. So I would consider taking down the Dusclops a little bit more in this matchup and just accepting they're going to have a massive hand than anything else. But, I mean, this one is pretty rough from the start, so I wouldn't beat yourself up if you're up against Dragapult Dusknoir or not having the best time into it. Moving on, we actually have done pretty great on time, and I want to talk about this deck's master ranking, or, how well I think it is in 7 categories, and then its overall ranking. Just to premise, all of these rankings are based off my own personal experience and research with the deck, so let me know if you feel differently. But first, I do want to talk about the the price for the deck. Now, the deck is going to be at a 9 out of 10 on the price. I mean, this deck is insanely cost effective. I mean, Fezandipiti, again, I've talked about it in pretty much every single video I've made in the series. It's $17. It sucks. You need it in every single deck, so it's not the worst price investment. I think once you buy the Fez, you could probably buy the rest of the deck for a crisp $20 bill, if that. So it's definitely one of the most cost-effective rogue decks out right now, but I feel like many rogue decks are pretty cost-effective. Just the fact that you need Fezandipiti, I think, is the only thing stopping this from being a total 10 out of 10. Now, the next solid thing to talk about is the consistency of this deck, which I think is an 8 out of 10. Now, when this deck bricks, it feels pretty rough because chances are you actually have 6 energy and a basic Pokemon in your hand that is not Teal Mask Ogerpon. So that does get pretty annoying. But when you're playing 4 ofs, literally every single card imaginable, it actually is pretty hard to brick with this deck. And even if you miss the Squawkabilly, that doesn't stop the pure and utter speed you could set up with 4 Research plus Teal Dance plus Restart plus Fezandipiti plus, like more search item cards like Bug Catching Set. So, as mentioned, 8 out of 10 feels appropriate. I'd even consider a 9 out of 10 for the consistency, but we'll stick with the 8. For the power of this deck, I'm definitely going to go with an 8 out of 10. This deck has the ability to OHKO anything in the format, and it really does not take that much effort since your draw engine sets up energy across the board, and that's not even accounting for the fact that you do have manual attachments and energy switches as well, just to boost the power. The reason I can't give it a 9 or a 10 is it does take a little bit of setup to get there, but the deck's raw power, given that you have the ability to set up, is absolutely absurd, so I think an 8 out of 10 is a very appropriate power rating. Now, for the matchups, I think that is going to be where this deck falls pretty short, and we are sitting at a 6 out of 10. Having an auto loss to arguably the most popular deck and definitely an S tier deck in the current format, Dragapult Dusknoir, does not feel amazing, but other than that, your matchup spread really isn't too bad. Even though Gardevoir is rough, Gardevoir is definitely winnable, and I think the more people that cut the Drifloon, the better your Gardevoir matchup can become. Now, do I think it's amazing? No, I think it's still rough, but there are more players than not who are actually opting to cut Drifloon. So I think, with that, keeping that in mind and the popularity of Golden Go and you just having Slime Mold Colony actually makes the matchup spread pretty respectable, and it's pretty even across the board, having 2 to 3 decks in almost every category. The speed for this deck is an 8 out of 10. I think if you're playing Carmine, the speed instantly jumps to 10 out of 10, but right now we don't mind going first so long as we could get Squawkabilly down. But past that, we are relying on a lot of single card draws off Teal Mask Ogerpon, and then a fat research in the early game to get us through. So we do need those working for us. This deck, regardless of that, is absurdly fast and so much fun to play because of it. Being able to just discard your hand on the first and second turn of the game with Squawk and Seize and then research allows you to fly through your deck at rates most other decks can't dream of right now. So I think overall it is way faster than most. The versatility for this deck is definitely where this deck falls super short, though, and sits at a 5 out of 10. You do have different lines into different decks, but generally you're just chasing down big 2-Praz KOs or support Pokemon in some of the harder matchups, and there's not really many other attackers that you could squeeze in this deck that guarantee you success into a lot of other matchups. I think maybe the single prize Ogerpon is my favorite single prize tech for the deck currently, just because it gives you a single prize attacker that you could use into Gardevoir, as well as Cornerstone, which does help a little bit. But once you look past that, there's really not much this deck can change, but because we're sacking our versatility, our consistency and our speed are also going to be a lot higher than other decks, especially when we're talking about rogue decks, so I think that's not necessarily the worst thing. Now, the base skill level for Toedscruel, I think, is a 9 out of 10. I really do think that this deck plays very similarly into almost every single matchup, so it is not super hard to just pick up and play, and I think actually is worth considering for maybe small local tournaments, or if you're an absolute demon, it could function at a regional level. I mean, you definitely have teeth, and this is not a deck someone can sleep on. It's not popular because you definitely have some rough matchups, but when you look past that, it's not super hard to learn, and once you accept that you just are losing to things like Dragapult Dusknoir, and that maybe there isn't a perfect way to deal with it, the better. Just accept that you've got some great matchups, and don't mind banking on a little bit of luck with your matchup spread, and boom, this is totally a deck you could play. I feel like that was kind of some of the things I wanted to talk about with this deck's overall rating of 7.5, but in general, I think, it's a great play overall. I think as far as rogue decks go, this 7.5 I do put on par with a lot of meta decks too right now, and definitely isn't the worst out. I think this is totally a deck people could say, yeah, I want to bring this to a League Cup, and I think I actually have a shot of winning. I mean, do you need to dodge a couple matchups here and there? Yeah, absolutely, but I feel like every deck could say the same thing right now for 1 or 2 matchups. I think the matchup spread in general is still a little harsh, but that's generally how rogue decks kind of go. Not all of them have phenomenal matchup spreads, or they would simply be played a lot more and wouldn't be a rogue deck to begin with. I think the right player could definitely take this deck very hard, though, and honestly, I'd be lying to you guys if I said this is not in the back of my mind when I even think about playing a rogue deck to a regional. It's a consistent deck that plays very smoothly, plays very fun, is not hard to play, and it's hard to have a bad time playing it. So I think a 7 out of 5 is very appropriate for the deck. You'll get a bunch of wins. There might be some tough losses, but they're always going to be good games, and you're playing Toedscruel, so that is pretty much it for everything I had prepped for you guys on today's masterclass. Of course, if you want to talk about any other intricacies in the deck or other cards you want me to consider as tech cards that I overlooked, please let me know in the comments down below. And of course, if there's any ways I could improve this series, I am all ears. This is a new series I've been making, the Master the Meta series, and although this is its sister series, Off Meta Mastery, all of them kind of follow the similar format of free masterclasses open to the public. So I'd love to talk about any decks you guys want to see next. So let me know those decks in the comments down below, and let me know if there's any other ways I can improve upon the series. With that being said, I want to just remind everyone that I do have that TCG player affiliate link. So if you made it this far into the video, clearly you're obsessed with Toedscruel, and you might as well go buy the deck. The link to my TCG player is down below. So if you're going to TCG player to order any of the singles, just make sure you order them within 48 hours of just simply clicking on the link, and you'll support the channel in an absolutely massive way. Thank you so much to everyone watching. I hope you guys are doing absolutely amazing. Stay epic. Peace.